You're tuned in to the MtG Cable cast, where they cover Magic, the Gathering Finance. All right? You don't know about it? You're tuned in right now and get ready to learn some shit. Buckle your seatbelts and light a blunt and get ready for the MtG Cable cast. Starring Reptar and Thirsty, them onion head motherfuckers.
Alrighty, guys. Welcome to the newest episode of the Cabalcast. And this week we are going over something of an annual tradition, and that is the Mecca of Gaming, GenCon in Indianapolis. This was the, I believe, 54th running of GenCon.
Something in there, yeah.
Somewhere like that. So we have some feedback from vendors, players, experiences, thoughts, things like that, because this is, as much as it is not a Magic event, it's certainly influential in the overall gaming economy, and we thought that was worth noting. So with that, let's take it away.
Yeah. So for me, the majority of my experience this year was actually from player experience. A lot of the vendors that I know that end up going, it seemed like chopped a booth or two. So they were all kind of coalesced in effectively a smaller amount of space. But the players that I knew that were going, one of them had been effectively training, quote unquote, for the showcases before we knew what the prizes were. When we knew there was just going to be one, he wanted to go to GenCon. So he's like, I want to go to GenCon, and there's going to be a Legacy, so we'll start jamming. Yeah. And another one decided to pivot and go to GenCon about a month out. And so I'd been engaging with him on the side about my experiences in Legacy, talking over deck choices. And as the perennial Delver player, we talked about the list that I played in Baltimore, the winning list from Baltimore, things like that, in prep to possibly play in the showcases. And I thought he would, but he ended up not going, but I do have a story about that. After that, it seemed pretty light overall. The auction this year seemed really interesting. I don't know if anybody that went.
Yeah, one of my buddies from overseas that comes in for this went, because it's just insane.
Yeah. On both ends of the spectrum, one of my guys was there and was not sure why a Badlands that was like MP sold for 500, but a Secret Lair bundle that retailed for over 200 sold for 60. So this is the kind of stuff that happens at the auction, like the regular people auction. And it seemed like everybody just had a blast in general. We got the annual running of the nerds as the main doors opened, and all the time-lapse footage of that main hallway just kind of like filled in, because it seemed like a lot of the new hotness this year was centered around board games and not something like Lorcana. There weren't a lot of stories of people getting trampled.
I was going to say, nobody got trampled as far as I know this year.
And it seemed just kind of like a regular Gen Con, and people really enjoyed it. There are a lot of photos that I saw go up early that were either from vendors or maybe Gen Con staff themselves of the setup in Lucas Oil Stadium.
Oh, it's so nice.
Because it looked like this year, at least the photos that I saw, they didn't have the LARP sessions in there. It looked like they had vendors on the field again, but I don't know what they were vending, because again, it was just the raw table setups that I saw.
Yeah.
And nobody that I knew that went engaged with what went on in Lucas Oil. They were mainly in Gen Con proper to play those events.
Yeah. It's really interesting because Gen Con is basically a local event for St. Louis. It's 4 hours or 5 with the time change. And there's a group of about 20 to 30 of us that have been going just about every year for 15, 20 years now. And it's interesting. One of them, who is a very good friend who has played Magic since when I started around Revised, said one of the best quotes I've heard about kind of not just the indication of older players that are kind of aging out of Magic. I'm in my late 30s now, like it's not what it used to be. But also just, and I think this is good, and I want to stress that, Gen Con in general. And he said, I got to play one game of Magic all Gen Con, and it was the best Gen Con I've ever had. Which, again, I think that's a good thing for Magic and for Gen Con. It's also kind of a bad thing for Magic, because in order for it to be a good thing, Wizards has to put on good events.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
Without that leg happening, it's not necessarily as true. But most of what I heard from people as far as players was, it was a good event. I had one friend that went for Legacy. He actually was in the alpha draft when they did that at GenCon. He top 8'd the event prior and qualified. And he, and I know you will appreciate this as the local Delver guy, was played in one of the queues for the Legacy Super Challenge. Decided, you know what, I don't want to do that, because Friday he walked by the top 16. Every single table had a UC in play. He said at the Legacy event, it looked like people, like around 50 to 70% of the meta was on either Scam or Delver. But he was happy to go because Legacy was being played at a high level. Yep. Regardless of Wizards saying that was not Legacy at a high level, that was Legacy at a high level.
Yeah.
I mean, there were people who, like a buddy of mine was running Delver and he was maining 4 ley lines. Cool. That is something that only someone who dedicates their time to only Legacy would ever try.
Yep.
And in that way, I think that's great, because that is someone trying to engage with an entrenched community within Magic that is frankly neglected. Everyone's catering to EDH now. Everyone's catering to Modern. I get it. It's where the players are. But when you have events for these more niche communities, they'll travel out to get them. Yeah. And I think that's really good. And I hope that that kind of works as an example for other companies to try these larger events for these fringe formats, because it obviously works. The other feedback was that in terms of the open play areas, and this is always something I find really interesting, because I think it was 2020, they added that 24-hour hall.
Yep.
And it changed the tenor of GenCon for me in a good way, because it seemed like now, no matter what, when I want, quote, downtime, I can go game. And it was much cleaner than this year than in previous ones. Trash was picked up more frequently. But they said that overall, the event staff seemed more annoyed by people that were coming up from Magic than by people for other events, which is just interesting from like a TO and event organizer perspective for me. I don't know what would cause you, unless it's just, all right, here's another pack of new standard set from the last month. Like, here you go. But it was really interesting. They said that by and large, and this is something that I think is really important, it seemed like the player demographics for each game had shifted significantly younger at the open play areas. Okay. There were multiple tables, my buddy said, like early afternoon on Saturday, I think it was, of like 7 to 9-year-olds playing Star Wars. Like just absolutely having a blast. I assume they were playing Double Suns, which is like the 2-headed giant. But, and that's something that I think is why events like GenCon are important, even as they get further away from Magic, is because those kind of indicators trickle down to all of gaming. It's not just board gaming and, tabletops. So I think that's really important, and a lot of people may miss that.
Yeah, a lot of what you said is echoed by the 2 people that I know that went. My one friend that pivoted and decided to go ended up not playing in any of the showcase trials, and he felt vindicated in his decision when he was birding the top 8 or the top 16 and just saw Scam all the way down.
Yep.
Because he was not prepared for that much deck, that much of that deck, even as a Delver player, which is perfectly fine. And so he just pivoted to hanging out with the people that we know that are gamers and are vendors at GenCon. There's a photo of him out to dinner with just a table of vendors, because that's just who we still know. My other friend, my local, who had been prepping for the event, that basically he got in at a time where he could have started playing trials at like 7 p.m. on Friday or something like that, but he dodged that one and came back for, I think, the next one. Similarly, played one match of Magic, exited, but had a blast the rest of the event because he got to experience all of GenCon. So he was at the panel when Gavin announced Mystery Boosters 2, which happened in such a way, I didn't know how the story went, but it goes in such a way that I think this person was a plant, which is, it was like an audience question of when are we getting the next mystery boosters too? And Gavin said, can I do it? Can I just announce it now? And then apparently cards started being handed out almost immediately to the audience. So I actually got to see close to a dozen of the playtest cards when he got back from Gen Con. Like I had them in hand. I got to feel what they were like, the stickers and stuff like that, see what they were doing with the playtest cards. Because not only did this person receive some while they were at the panel, but they also got to play in a Mystery Booster 2 event, but they did not get the invite until like the other cool Mystery Booster event that happened, and he was kind of sad about that.
Yeah.
Then he went to the auction, had a great time watching that, watching some people bid on some really silly things from Lord of the Rings, and I think he bought a sword from an anime that I don't remember the name of, and then just overall had a blast. A lot of what his friends are into are board games. They're not Magic, so they use it as kind of an excuse to just demo a lot of new product in that regard. Instead of going to Origins, which is like Gen Con for board games, they went to board games Gen Con because it's just a generic convention effectively now, and still got to demo a lot of really cool board games. And one of the guys that I play Magic with, who's also very heavily into board game, had a very good conversation over dinner about some of the new stuff that had just come out that he wanted to know about, that this guy had actually just decided to play while he was there. And it seemed like no matter what, everybody had a really good experience this year because they weren't just there for the Showcase Showdown, the Legacy event. They weren't, like, I think I'd have to double check, but I heard like Nathan Stoyer showed up to play in the Legacy event, and if that's true, then like of course then Nathan's most likely there to play that event. He's not there for Gen Con, but then you know that like Sam Black is in the room playing, Caleb Durward is there. I know Caleb was grinding in, and he's there for that, but he also goes to CubeCon and a bunch of other shit, so he's most likely there for Gen Con itself, just like Sam Black is there for Gen Con itself. And it seems like when you're there and you're not there for that dedicated event, things get a little more interesting overall. And this kind of segues us into what we wanted to talk about as well, which is just, do we think that Magic at Gen Con can or should make a return?
I kind of referenced this earlier. I think in order for Magic to exist in a positive, healthy, good ecosystem, there needs to be an event like Gen Con for Magic planned by someone. I think at this point, the market has clearly shown that board gamers are not tabletop gamers, are not card gamers necessarily. And I think that something like a Gen Con, which is more TCG focused, is the way it should go. If there's going to be a dedicated presence of Magic there. That said, I love shit like the Legacy Super Showcase or Legacy in a Healthy Place.
Yeah.
I loved that like Alpha Top 8 draft they did. That was awesome. I love having unique showcasey events at Gen Con for Magic that aren't tied to like the pro scene, because once upon a time, Gen Con was kind of struggling, and a small card game came along, and at first, the first year it was there, nobody cared, but by year 2, it was all anyone was talking about at Gen Con, and that was Magic. So there is definitely a shared history between Magic and Gen Con. That's where it premiered. It's kept the health going, through the late 90s into the early aughts. But I don't think it should be like it was once upon a time where the Legacy and Vintage World Championships were at Gen Con.
Yep.
Eternal Weekend is a perfect example of what I would like to happen, just on a larger scale. I think Magic needs to be there or should be there, but I also don't think it should be the main thing. Prime example, and guys I used to set up with occasionally and work for, Old Cranky Man Games. They set up this year, and they have divested themselves entirely of Magic. They've gone into non-Magic games. And they said there were no vendors dedicated to one card game that were there, though there were very few card game vendors, except one. and they were dedicated to Pokemon. Which makes sense.
Yeah. If you're going to dedicate
lowest
to
common
one
denominator to graphic at a Gen Con, it's literally the 3-year-old to the 80-year-old.
Yeah.
Like, they'll all buy something there, and they had cards and plushies and like all Pokemon stuff. It wasn't just cards.
Yeah. The Pokemon Company does so much. It's such a wide product catalog. Yeah. The Legos now. Yeah.
Yeah. They're like, okay, that doesn't count, guys. But yeah, and I think it should exist. I just don't know that it should. I don't think it should be the focus like it once was.
Yeah. So everything you said is something I thought about, because my first thought was, well, what is high profile at Gen Con, or what was high profile? And my first thought was, oh yeah, we used to have vintage and legacy champs there, but that puts a very specific community of Magic players in the hall to do the one thing. And once they're done with the one thing, they don't have to be there for Gen Con anymore. It's also a weird security risk, and those people aren't necessarily there to engage with Gen Con. They're there to engage with their event. And I'm like, okay, what do we do after that? And I didn't come back to the beta draft that was done there, because I forgot how people got into that. I just remember it happening, and they streamed it. I thought, what was the next one? I'm trying to remember. There was something else that happened there. I think there's the Legacy Showcase is something I was thinking about. And then I just immediately went to, oh yeah, at one point in time, U.S. Nationals was at Gen Con annually. And I was like, you know what? Is that a good thing for Magic? Because they ran side events on demand, basically win-a-boxes every Nats. Like, well, that puts a number, like, is that just the same problem as putting Legacy and Vintage champs there? Like, maybe not. It all, like, Nats, I think, historically was standard, so it casts the widest net of players. It's there to showcase the newest sets for the game, the newest format. But again, you're asking Magic players that might not want to engage with Gen Con to come down and do this thing. And that might actually, of what we've seen, if we just want to point to something historically and say, that's the one, I think it's the safest overall, because it showcases so much of the game that it is an opportune event to have there. We don't have Nats anymore, so you've got to come up with something else. You could put the World Championships there if you wanted to. That would be akin to having Legacy and Vintage champs there. It is a very small crowd, but you got to figure how many people are honestly at Worlds. You're setting up your own event now for Vegas in October, I think, right? That's Worlds?
Yeah. I think it's Worlds.
Yeah, is it worthwhile to have it outside on your own as opposed to tying back into Gen Con and doing it there and pushing all your hoopla there? Because I have played Magic at a GP at Lucas Oil Stadium. It can be done. You can do that stuff at the same time, and you can extend Gen Con that way and just move Magic to its own fucking facility like that and put on the entire show you want to and do it in a football stadium with a Titantron. Like, those are all things that are available to you. Yeah. If you don't want to do that, then I think something gonzo like the Showcase Showdown is a good thing to do with a format that's healthy. Yeah. Like the caveat you put on it. And I think right now those would be the two routes I would run. I would either put Worlds at Gen Con, or I would do the Showdown, but I wouldn't just be a curmudgeon about my ban list. Right? Like, they didn't fix Legacy before EW one year, and Ren and 6 just mushed. Very clearly. That card
was the first one I worked. It was terrible.
Yeah, that card needed to be banned real quick. Like, cool. Yeah. Like, they made that mistake once very publicly, and then they did it again. They just ran it back with the Legacy event. Yeah. So I think there are a lot of things you could be doing for Gen Con and make Magic great at Gen Con. You don't have to just kind of relegate it like we did for a little while we were figuring it out. You just let the local TOs. No, you can actually push a Magic event there. At this point in time, these two events are like tied hand in hand. Like, Gary Gygax created this thing. Yeah. He floats your goat, literally. Like, if you didn't have his game under your umbrella, your company wouldn't have been able to publish Magic in the first place. Like, this is, learn your history, you know?
Please. Yeah, and the other thing I think is, I mean, even thinking of what Gen Con is kind of transformed into, It used to be a place where everyone could enjoy gaming, and there were 10 games, and all of those 10 got a ton of space. Now Gen Con is a lot more because, again, they've kind of trended younger about bringing people in.
Yeah.
So having these events and making them like something splashy, like a World Championships or a showdown of a healthy format. Look, you have World Championships. Oh my God, look at these guys. They're playing this game with cards, winning thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
That's alluring to people to draw them in. You have this cool legacy secret showdown with a unique card and stuff. That's awesome prizes. What are they doing? I want to know. That's a way to bring people to your game and to Arena. But that's something. It is an event about acquiring new customers and advertising rather than re-engaging with your existing ones. That's not what Gen Con is anymore. So I think if they want to continue to have a good stream of income, maybe go lower on the Universes Beyond since their licensing costs seem so high and go more for something like a Gen Con to try to advertise.
Yeah. The more we think about it, the more I'm talking myself into this because all the tools are there and you're just pulling from extant sources. So Gen Con is a celebration of gaming and Worlds is a celebration of Magic. So you just put two and two together. You take over Lucas Oil Stadium. You use the bottom, either the field itself, probably not the best idea, or you do the conference rooms underneath Lucas Oil Stadium where the majority of the event happens. And you can do your feature match areas broadcasting upstairs on the Titantron on the field. You let people just kind of fill into the chairs on the field and in the chairs around the stadium. That's where you put your commentary booth, etc. And it just all works from upstairs. And then when you break it down maybe to the top 8, you do what Pokemon Worlds does, which is exactly what Evo does. You have the matches on stage, and the coverage is effectively right above them on the Titantron. And Pokemon World solved the problem of how you have a live audience watching coverage on a big screen in the same room that the match is going on, not with a delay, but by putting, I think,
Wasn't it headphones?
Two professors, I believe, at the table. That's the judges for Pokemon, one on each side. Yes, in the same headphones we've seen them wear in the feature match area before at Pro Tours, and then the players get those same headphones, so you're all just closed circuit.
Yep.
And you navigate the game that way. Everything is right there. And it kind of allows you to bring that massive crowd to the players and vice versa. All the concession stands are there. There's the, I don't know what you call them, the merchandise, like the booth storefronts. You can just sling your MagicCon wares from, etc. It's all right there. You can actually just turn it into an event where people are meant to watch Magic instead of an event where they're meant to come and play Commander and watch game nights and be the loudest thing in the room while people are trying to concentrate and play Magic. Like the way MagicCons and it seems like Worlds are now is just people yelling about whatever is going on at the game night stage while a game of Magic broke out instead of having a game of Magic where coverage just happened to break out.
Yeah.
And I think that's something like that would be fantastic for Magic and Gen Con, or maybe just Gen Con in general. I mean, I know Pokemon Worlds generally happens in Japan, but we still have Yu-Gi-Oh! Swoos coming up. We have Fab, etc. Yeah. Why not push some of those onto literally one of the largest stages in gaming that is an Evo? Like, come on, we can do that. And I think that
especially, I mean, like, if gaming has truly broken mainstream, which Dungeons and Dragons has, why not try to bring mainstream here?
Yeah. And I think Gen Con is the perfect place to do that. I know, board game tournaments happen all over the place. They're their own unique thing. You're never going to really have anything like that break out at Gamma or PAX Unplugged. I don't think those are the events for it. But like the way Gen Con is shaping up, the way gaming like this and the trading card and digital space is happening, it seems like a perfectly equivalent place and time to do something like this.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'd be excited to go at Gen Con if that happened.
Same. If it was like, I mean, at that point, it's like, shit, Super Bowl of gaming.
Yeah, exactly.
Why not?
Yeah, like you're already taking over the space. You're already expanding into downtown Indianapolis. Like they're already carved out. I mean, shit, push the vendors out to the parking lot. As long as it's sunny, it doesn't matter. So,
As long as it's not too hot. Last year, my Yeezy slides melted to the blacktop, so
all right,
I had to get a new pair. Yeah.
Oh yeah, you got to get one of those Vans Warped Tour tents. Those
Yep.
those white tents. Yeah. Yeah, I feel like this year, anecdotally for Gen Con, this is the last thing I'm going to say to kind of wrap up on my end. It seemed to be better than the last few years. And I know we're still coming out of the pandemic. They're still trying to figure out what they wanted to do. But because there wasn't just everybody hyped about Lorcana and like half the event standing in line for that, this year, like the year before, or sorry, that was the year before, 2 years ago, it's, we were just trying to figure out what the hell we were doing. This one seemed kind of like a return back to normalcy for Gen Con. People were there and they were excited to just see what was even being demoed and enjoy Gen Con for Gen Con and not try to get their hands on some early product. They were just there to really enjoy, the convention for what it is.
And I think that's honestly one of the best things that's happened both to Magic and Gen Con is people just taking Gen Con for what it is. Yeah. What's there is what's there because it's what's relevant to the general gaming public. If it's not something that sells at a high volume, then at a store or at, a website that's not Amazon, then it's there. Mm-hmm. They even have last year there were new like Kickstarter type services that were there advertising.
That's cool.
Like tech is starting to make its way into Gen Con. And I think that it's just, even if you don't engage with gaming outside of Magic, I think Gen Con is one of the most important things that you can engage with in terms of market forces and what you need to know about what's happening generally. Because it's absolutely the pulse of gaming.
Yep, 100%. And I did find out this year that their logo is a dragon nicknamed Genevieve.
Yep.
News to me. After we talked about like the history of Gen Con, that wasn't anywhere that I remember. So, still learning.
Yeah.
Anything else before we go to picks?
No, let's start with picks.
All right. I went first last week, so you can talk about.
That's great.
Your Squid
Band. We were just talking about banned announcements. Or banning announcements. I am picking a very odd thing this week, and that is going to be banned modern cards. Why the hell am I pointing these out? Well, I'm going to use one as an example, and we're just going to go for Dark Depths because it has proven itself relevant in the modern format, specifically the events that are making me call these out, and that is no ban list modern events. Something that's been popping up over the last 6 to 8 months. There's been more online events for no ban list modern. There have been more in-person events for no ban list modern. Chimera Gaming over next state over in Illinois there, they had an event, I think it was last month. It was a 1K for no ban list modern.
Star City they were very proud to have one at an Invitational.
Yeah. It is a format that seems to have survived because no ban list modern, I think it became a thing like shortly pre-pandemic. And then you had like Frontier and Middle School and Pre-Modern and all these community formats kind of come out of the woodwork to try to like fill a void. And none of them have survived as well as no ban list modern, which still has a lot of support. And I think the thing that makes it very interesting and the reason that people are into those cards is because now the modern format gets an insane shakeup every year that completely breaks the format in half. So people want to know, what's it like with Modern Horizons 3 in no ban list modern?
Yeah.
And the reason I am calling these out is because a lot of these cards do not have a lot of value. Dark Depths is a prime example. It's been reprinted like 8 or 9 times. It is, I think the low right now is around $4 or $5, somewhere in there. And the reason I say that is because a lot of these may be cards you pass on normally. You may not want to deal with this kind of stuff. Yeah. And that's fine. But there is a lot of liquidity here. Dark Depths obviously has other formats that it's legal in or where it does well as a 4 of. Splinter Twin does insane work in EDH, Free the Political Prisoner. And as a bonus, if any of these cards ever get unbanned, they explode. Yep. I don't think Sway of the Stars is going to explode.
No, but you have exception. Like in the S's alone, Sensei's Divining Top and Skull Clamp. above Splinter Twin. So
Yeah. It's a very good list of high impact cards that if these events continue to be well attended, continue to be well supported, may start making waves in paper prices because people are getting out to these events in person more. They're not necessarily just on Moto, or I guess not really Arena, but they're not just through Moto.
Yeah.
So it's something that I wanted to call out because I've seen more and more people posting, here's my event recap of No Ban List Modern, like every weekend. And it got me thinking, maybe these cards actually have a decent amount of liquidity. And the more and more it turns out deck lists got posted, guess what was on there? Cards that are banned.
Yeah.
And people need those cards.
Yeah, for sure. And there's also something that's happening tangentially to this, which is just, I know for a fact MTG Goldfish, along with some other content creators, every now and then go back to the well and just try and pit old decks from Modern against one another. And the reason I'm talking about Goldfish is because I've started seeing them recently, and they moved from the mid-range deck in Standard 2024, which is the Orzhov deck with the legendary bat, to against Jund from Modern in 2014. But then from there, they went to play the Eldrazi Winter deck against the Cloud Post deck that was banned after the first Modern Pro Tour, which was the first Modern event. They just recently played Hogak against Nadu, which we expect to be banned by the time this episode releases, a week.
Yeah.
So they're effectively going back and doing this. They're not playing no ban list Modern because they're not innovating. They're just showing you basically why these cards were banned in the first place.
Yeah.
There are other creators that are doing similar things and also playing no ban list.
Yeah. I think it's a really good opportunity because this is, in a weird way, kind of just like an emergent market almost.
Yeah.
And it's in its nascency. And if it does develop, it's obviously a huge opportunity. So I wanted to point it out.
Yep. And the nice part is like you said, some of these have no real price, but the thing is, if you pick them up when you see them, there's opportunity that they just pick up in price over time anyway. Without Modern Horizons 3, Eye of Ugin, which is banned in Modern, would not be the $80 card it is now, thanks not to a Modern deck because it's banned there, but a Legacy deck, right? And then there's another one on this. Chrome Mox banned in Modern, but without Legacy and CEDH, there would be no push for this card. But there was a point in time where you could pick them up for like $20 or less, and now they're close to $100, which, as we talked about a couple months ago, is because of CEDH, but it smacks of everything you're saying, which is just pick it up when you see it, and then there's opportunity on the back end. There's something else that I saw in here as well. We know SDT, that one's easy.
Mox Opal.
Yeah.
When Mox Opal got banned in Modern, I was picking them up for $30.
Yeah. People want to get rid of them. You've got nothing, so you scoop.
Yeah.
I feel like Mycosynthlatus did the same thing, but I do not have that in front of me. And I think Green Sun Zenith did it as well. Everybody pushed on them when it got banned, I think, after Philly. And so you were able to kind of scoop from there. Field of the Dead banned in Modern, but that's like a $20 or $30 or heading towards $30 card right now because of Commander, where it's still legal, and Legacy because you can play it in Nadu and do dumb things with Nadu. So you have that as well. Birthing Pot has just been, it gets banned in Modern, it tanks, it sits there forever. You can just scoop them out of player binders for cents on the dollar because no vendor wants them. They're impossible to move, and they're just trending up and up and up because of Commander. So there's always, generally speaking, opportunity for these cards in other formats where they could potentially see an increase because of that. And I think stuff like this is honestly a good look here and there. And who knows, when they do have to go through and ban a bunch of cards in Modern, sometimes they unleash cards as well. They've banned Golgari Grave Troll twice now. Cool. At least they tried something, you know?
Was it legal when Hogak was out? I can't remember. I know it was around that time.
It was somewhere
like,
in there,
God,
but I didn't see it in that deck.
Okay.
We were joking about it because it was banned, unbanned, banned, unban and ban again, that there's just a lever that's just like, in case of
Yeah.
emergency, unban Golgari Grave Troll, and then when you're done, you just put the lever back up and you ban it again.
Yep.
But like they're trying. Like Eye of Ugin might not. The problem is Emrakul the Aeon's Torn. The problem is not necessarily Eye of Ugin. Yeah, Eldrazi Winter was harsh for everyone, but the format has changed so much that people can kind of keep up with the low-end bullshit that deck did. Like,
Yeah.
cool 2/2 for like nothing on turn 1. I'll deal with that when I play a 2/3 in 2 turns, or I just combo your ass out on 3. Like, sure, I'll eat my lumps. I'll take 15 damage over the next couple turns, and then I'll win. Like, I think that like things like that, there's opportunity here.
Yeah.
So I like the look overall. For me this week, I'm going with the Legacy card. So we're sticking with Constructed again, and we are taking a look this week at Broadside Bombardiers, a card that came out. Everybody went, it's a piece of crap. And then 2 weeks later, they're like, holy shit. And they just bought every copy they could. So Broadside Bombardiers is a really weird card. It's 2 and a red for a Goblin Pirate, 2/2, Haste Menace, and it has the Boast keyword. Sacrifice another creature or artifact. Broadside Bombardier deals damage equal to 2 plus the sacrifice permanent's mana value to any target. Activate only if this creature attacked this turn and only once each turn. So, I'm pretty sure we talked about this card earlier on, and I, like everybody else, seemed to make a mistake about what Boast meant, and we thought we could just shotgun our board at people. Not the case. Still a good card.
Yeah.
When I took my notes this week, CK was buying 107 at $9. They're now buying 97 at $8.50, so we lost a little off the top, but not a ton. They had 8 for sale at 15, and that price should still be holding. On TCG Player, there are 103 listings left, LP or better, with a market price of $8.61. There are now 98 listings left with a market price of about $8.90, so we're seeing traction there. And when I added this to my list in late November of 2023, CK was buying 355 at $3.50. They had none in stock, and they were selling for $6. And there were 9 listings on TCG Player for $4.60. And this was basically like a week or two after release that I added this to my list. It was released on November 5th, and I just slammed it on my list on the 11th. Basically, if we go back to stocks, the 11th is the day like right before, or like right in the middle of this trough, and then this thing just goes vertical on stocks and then flattens out. Now, the playability on this is basically just my favorite quote from Austin Powers: "Who throws a shoe? Honestly, because you're just hucking everything you got lying around. If you've got an artifact or a creature, you're throwing it." When it comes to Legacy, Broadside Bombardiers isn't a, quote, format staple, unquote, by any means, but it assists in the Dragon Stompy, Mono Red Prison, Red Initiative, Goblins decks to a degree. You'll also see it in Painter Shells. None of these are really close to the upper echelons of the format at the moment. Painter is very close, but most Painter builds don't play Bombardiers at the moment. There is the school of thought that Painter is well positioned once Grief gets unbanned, and we don't really know what Painter will look like, if it'll be Rakdos, Mono Red, play Bombardiers not. There's some fluctuation here. But it does give each one of these decks reach in a way they had never really had before, on top of an interesting kind of like escape valve for some of your own lock pieces. So you just enter combat and then like fling your 3-ball and start casting your 1 and 2 mana spells if you got to. That's Trinisphere for people who don't know the colloquialism. Now, this doesn't actually have a lot of traction in Commander at the moment, which is honestly mind-boggling. This is very much a reading the card, explains the card situation, and that kind of seems to be how people engage with it, as it's really only seeing play in pirate-themed decks and goblin lists with a smattering of treasure decks on the side. And I think there might be a combo in the Marchesa, the Black Rose list, but
there is, yeah.
This isn't in like a dedicated artifact shell, and that is, again, mind-boggling. People just read the card and like, oh, Goblin Pirate, so we just put in the Goblin decks and the Pirate decks. It's like, the rest of the text box is actually important, not the type line. And people just kind of missed that one. Most artifact lists involved red and a number of mid and high mana value cards that can be tossed with Bombardiers for an efficient and unexpected kill or start a recursion chain. You don't even need to throw something inside combat. You can wait until the end of your turn and do it as an instant. You can throw something in your second main phase after casting it. It's basically Bosch Iron Golem, but cheaper and obviously limited to once per turn.
Yeah.
This also targets any target, so you can hit a player, a creature, a planeswalker, a battle. Anything that's got a chin. Anything that you can target and deal damage to, this can tag. It's incredible. It's incredibly flexible and utilitarian. I don't understand why people aren't playing this. It just honestly seems like players don't want to close out games. That's why they're not really engaging with this.
Casuals.
Now, after the initial hype, I haven't seen this really pop up anywhere outside of constructed decks, and it seems like Commander players on the whole haven't really figured out either the power of this card or the utility of this card. It is selling most days at about an average quantity of 1 per order, so there are Commander players out there that are looking at this card, but at least the self-selecting or self-reporting crowd that uses EDH Rec hasn't seemed to show up and show out for this card. They're just missing it, and it makes no sense.
I think one of the when I first saw this card, and maybe I'm in the minority, my first thought was Duretti. I don't know how that wasn't what everyone immediately globbed onto.
Yep.
I also do remember very briefly when this card was everywhere in Legacy and was like $50.
Yep.
Obviously, Painter was everywhere then too, so that's why. But
the initiative deck was actually also very big at that point,
yeah,
heading into this is one of those things that
into
hit
EW,
right.
yeah.
EW, right. So there was that. It had most likely flashed up heading into EW.
And the thing is, that to me says this card has a price history. It has a history of being constructive, playable, and good. It's also not, I mean, it's a Commander Licks product card. That set was awful. I don't expect that this was widely opened. So I don't know how many more of these we necessarily have waiting to get out.
Yep.
But
now, this does sell about 10 copies a day. There are, when I was taking my notes, 215 total LP and Yearman copies. So the sell-through in this card happens in about a month. The largest quantity for sale is 16 copies for LP at $12.56. And after the 70 cheapest listings sell through, this jumps from a $9 listing to a $12 listing. And I'm using the word listing for a reason. This is a card that has a masked price based on shipping. Most shipping on this card is well over $1, unless you start buying in quantity.
yeah.
Now, vendor prices are keeping up as well, so there is immediate arbitrage opportunity from TCG Player to CK. So for right now, you can actually buy one of these for $8 and send it to CK for $11 in credit. Cool. That is an option you have in front of you. As far as reprint equity goes, I definitely mucked this one up because for whatever reason I wrote down Raid instead of Boast. But this is basically just a Goblin Pirate with Haste, Menace, and Boast. And I don't think that it's going to see a reprint anywhere in a supplemental set that's meant to be drafted. Otherwise, it might have to be upshifted to Mythic because it just deals so much splash damage in general, and this is not a fun Mythic to open. It's either a real feels bad to open when you can't support it, or it's just miserable to play against and creates a ton of feels bad. Raid is basically unattached to anything, which is the note I had, and which is incorrect. We're talking about Boast, which is similarly unconnected to anything. So it's not like this is really tied to a plane or an idea. This is just a creature that has an ability. So we can and probably will see it in a Commander deck again, but it really needs to be a deck full of baubles and little trinkets that to throw. I don't really know what this deck was doing. I haven't looked through the list, but if I had to assume anything, it was probably close to, like you mentioned, the Duretti deck, at least the Scrap Savant deck, the mono red Duretti Planeswalker, because it's just a bunch of little trinkets. You just yeehaw across the board.
Yep.
So I would expect a reprint of this in time when they want to do a Red X artifact deck and just give people fodder. But By quantity on this, I've got my play set for Legacy, and honestly, I'd be happy to have another 8 on top of these to kind of trade out. This is a card that doesn't exist on my LGS, never has. There are definitely players there who would take advantage of this, but because this is not a card that really sees play in any kind of meaningful way, the only way they're going to know about it is either searching through Rec and finding the very small number of decks that just have it for whatever reason, or see it in a binder.
Yeah, this is one that I like. I would buy it in, the classic EDH sets of 5 for me. So yeah, like in that 10 to 15 range is almost exactly where I'd want to be on it as well, because I think it is like, where's the adoption?
Yeah. For people who want to know, this is an 8,565 decks on Rec of a possible 1.1 million. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 individual commanders that are listed here. There is one new commander, and Edward Kenway from the Assassin's Creed set. Nobody shows out for this card. Beckett Brass, Andres the Renegade, cool pirates, Breaches, oh, another pirate, Admiral Beckett Brass, oh, a pirate, Agnes, Treasure, Marchesa, like we said, combo, and then Krenko, Goblins. People just literally read the type line on this card and went, got it, figured it out.
God. Oh.
Or at least the self-reporting crowd did.
Yeah.
And I think this serves as another good reminder that the self-reporting crowd isn't always the crowd we need to care about and isn't always the right crowd to target with something. Sometimes you got to target the kitchen table crowd, and this card doesn't necessarily target the kitchen table. This targets legacy players, and this targets people who know about this card.
Yeah.
So.
That's enough.
Yeah. Anything about the spec before you shove off for the week?
Nope.
All right, so for at MtG Cabalcast on Twitter, Facebook, Patreon, and YouTube, I am at Halt I am Reptar. You are
at Damon_Thurston.
And we'll see you next week.